Greetings to everyone. My name is Bisanyasi Muhammad. My matric number is 2521113. We are grade 7. Today we're gonna discuss about the institution school, the 5 major questions, and contribution of Thorstein Veblen, Wilson Mitchell, and John Kenneth in developing ideas of the school in chapter 19. So now we're gonna move about the introduction. Moving to the introduction was the Institutional School, an American contribution to economic thought which began around 19 and which still continues to the present. In this chapter, we will focus more about the traditional institutionalism instead of the new one, and we will discuss Veblen, who critically dissected the orthodox thinking and provided a theoretical approach of institutionalist economics, and Wilson Mitchell, who simulated empirical researches with his own statistical studies, and John Galbraith, who popularized several institutionalist themes. And we're gonna pass to my friend now.
Hi, I am Manli. Matric number 279710. Now I am going to talk about history background of Institutionalist School. In the period between the Civil War and World War I, the achievements of American capitalism was impressive. Rapid growth made the United States the biggest and most powerful industrial system in the world, and living standards have improved. Although many wage earners' living standards have improved, nonetheless, their aspirations do not achieve. These are the aspirations that do not achieve. Hours of labor were long. Housing often was inadequate. Security of times of sickness. Unemployment. Old age was negligible. Higher education was inaccessible for most workers' children. Job security was virtually non-existent. Health and safety regulation was inadequate. Employers often organized company towns and ruled over workers even in their personal life. Large-scale immigration tend to cripple wage. Regressive taxation, widespread usury, and repeating recession wreak on individuals who lose their jobs. The age of monopoly began in the 1870s. Conservative voice predominated in the school, press, pulpits, and government. The state and federal governments have to program laissez-faire with respect to workers' interests, establishing tariff protection for business, and granting large subsidy to railroads. In the late of 19th century, many economists suspect to the assumption and conclusion of the neoclassical school. There was much concern about waste, depression, monopoly, and poverty. The social control and reform movement was gathering momentum, and institutional economics grew in this milieu. At the time, there are two major methods of achieving social change. First, reorganize society along socialist lines through government intervention. Second, undertake social reform to save capitalism. Instructional economics was being critical towards social movement and prefer a radical reconstruction of society. However, the institutionalist school he founded demonstrated the reformist approach. German Historical School is influential and well-known among the leaders of American Economic Association in terms of their movement and methodology. These are some illustrious teachers that have studied in Germany, who are John Beck Clark, George S. Morris, Richard T. Ely, John R. Commons. Despite certain similarities in methodology between German Historical School and American institutionalism, was not nationalistic but more liberal and democratic. That's all for me. Thank you.
Now we will talk about the major tenets of institutional schools. And these are the 7 key ideas of this school. Holistic broad perspective. The economy must be examined as a whole rather than small parts or separate entities isolated from the whole. The economic activity is not only some of the activities of personal, motivated, individual, or mechanical by desire for maximum monetary gain. In economic activity, there are also patterns of collective action that are greater than the sum of the parts. For example, a union develops a character, an ideology, or method of operations of its own, and its features cannot be deducted from the study of the individual members who belong to it. So, in the economic activity is too narrow that in the institutionalist view, there is certain interweave with politics, sociology, law, custom, ideology, tradition, and other human belief and experience. Focus on institution. The role of institutions are important. An institution is not an organization or established for promotions like objectives like schools, prison or union or federal system. It's also an organized pattern of a group behavior, well established and accepted as a fundamental part of culture, including customs, social habits, laws and modes of thinking and ways of living. And other examples beliefs in laissez-faire or unison or government social security system. So the economic decision is regulated by economic institutions, not by economic laws. Groups of social behavior and other patterns that influence are more general to economic analysis than individual emphasize in marginalist theory. So the institutions were special interested in analyzing and reforming the institution of credit. Evolutionary approach by Darwin. This approach should be used in economy because of society and institutions are constantly changing. The institution disagrees with the statistical viewpoint that sought the discovery of economic truth without regard of its differences in time and place, without concern of changes that were occurring constantly. Instead of asking what is it, the institution asks how we get here and where we going. And the evolution and functions of economic institutions should be used in economy as central theme. This approach requires knowledge not only in economy but history, cultural anthropology, political science, sociology, philosophy, and psychology. Rejections of the idea of a normal equilibrium. Institutions emphasize the principle of circular causations and cumulative changes that may either salutary or harmful seeking economic and social goals. Most adjustments in economy are not departures from the normal equilibrium, rather than themselves are normal. So before the War II, the outstanding mob adjustment was a business slump. Then in 1970s, the problem became stagflation. Similarities occurred of inflation and employment where problems of a trade deficit and federal budget deficit rise, and the institutions are convinced that collective control through the government are necessary to continue to correct and overcome the deficits and maladjustments in economic life. Clashes of interests. Instead of harmony, the institutions recognize a serious difference of interests. People said institutions were cooperative and collective. People, they recognized themselves into groups for mutual self-interest, which became a common interest in the group. However, the clashes between groups, such as a small business against big business, consumers against producers, the repressive government or impartial government must override the clash interests of the common and efficiency of working of economic system. Liberal democratic reform. The institutions adapt reforms in order to bring out more accurate distribution of wealth and income. They deny that the market prices are adequate, indicated individual and social welfare, and that unregulated markets lead to efficient allocation of research and just distribution of income. An institution is invariably condemned laissez-faire and favor a larger role for government in economic and social affairs. Rejection of pleasure pain psychology. The institution repudiates the panicked underpinnings of economic analysis. They reach out instead of better psychology, and some of them incorporated a Freudian and behaviorist idea into their thinkings.
A very good day to everyone. My name is Lim Yang and my metric number is 277096. For me, I will present the third major question is whom did institutionalism benefit or seeks to the benefit? For first, the school embodied the middle class desire for reform in an era of growing business and banker capitalism. It represented the need and the interests of agrarian, small business, and the labor group. It attracted the interest of government worker, reformer, humanitarian, leader of consumer organization, and a union member to the institutionalist idea, which they hope might alter the orientation of private business and the private in favor of their own interests. So many scholars in the sector and other that economy has prized the institutionalist interdisciplinary approach and the advocacy for social change.
Hi, I'm Darren. I will be talking about how was the institutionalist school valid, useful, or correct in its time. The institutionalists challenged the development of rigid orthodoxy in economic thinking. The institutionalists focused on economy as a whole of an evolutionary process, so that they added some element of realism to economic thinking and analysis. The institutions concerned over business cycles and monopolies, so that they promoted a reform movement that effectively removed many of the rough edges of capitalism. The emphasis of some of their members on inductive studies removed and reduced the gap between economic thinking, theory, and practice. One of their specialties is that their gathering and analyzing statistical data becomes so popular in government circles, among private, non-profit research organizations, in business and labor organizations, and among individual economists.
Good day, Doctor. My name is Samjayi. So I'm right now to present about which tenet of institutional school become lasting contribution. For the first one is holistic broad perspective, and the second one is the remove movement, and the third one is traditional institutional economics still present within United States today. So the first tenet is holistic broad perspective. Institutionalists advocated broader perspective was become reality in economy mainstream with the widespread acceptance of Keynesian macroeconomics. In fact, Keynesianists and post-Keynesianists tend to co-opt and replace the institutionalism in the prescription for stabilizing the economy, attraction to political liberals and aggregate approach. Next, the metaphor of six blind men and the elephant reveal the weakness of microeconomics. Based on this photo, it shows that the six blind men describe the elephant based on their limited experience, and their descriptions are different to others too. Hence, the institutionalist school did not agree microeconomics. This is because danger of excessive generalization from individual experience to the system as a whole, and the microeconomists focus on the action of individuals within economy and only concentrate on small part of total economy. The second tenet is the remove movement that promoted by the institutionalists remain alive today. The modest step toward national economic planning for limited objectives such as full employment, conservation, and international competitiveness are in line with institutionalist thought. Other than that, leisure protection of unionism, social insurance, minimum wages, and the maximum hours legislation are the legacies of institutionalist challenge to orthodox economic thinking. With the expanded interest in problems of economic development, there have been new emphasis on the influence of institutional environment on economic relations. The problem of economic development included diverse cultural factors are dynamic and evolutionary. The lasting contribution of institutionalists such as labor relations, and the second is industrial organization, and the third one is law and economics. Ironically, some innovative neoclassical contributions compose the new institutionalist analysis such as retirement policy, seniority, and property rights. The last tenet is traditional institutional economics still present within United States today. The membership of ASEE, which is Association for Evolutionary Economics, is largely composed of economists who oriented toward policy perspective, institutionalist method, or both. The organization also published the Journal of Economic Issue. However, overall penetration of institutionalists into mainstream of economics remain modest.
So we have three important economies of the Institutionalist School, which is Thorstein Bunde Veblen, Wesley, Clair, Mitchell, and John Kenneth Galbraith. Firstly, I will introduce the Thorstein Bunde Veblen. Veblen was the son of the Norwegian immigrant and he grew up in the rural Minnesota. He completed his undergraduate college education at the Collegiate College, Minnesota, and received a PhD from Yale University in philosophy. In 1882, he started to teach the political economy at the University of Chicago. He became known as the brilliant and economic thinker and an unconventional teacher. He also became an editor of Journal of Political Economy at University of Chicago. After Chicago, he also taught at Stanford, the University of Missouri, and the New School of Social Research. He also is the economist and sociologist in American and published the theory of the leisure class, the theory of the business enterprise, and the instinct workmanship and the state of the industrial art. In the end, he died in 1929 of heart disease. In 1899, Veblen published his first book, which is The Theory of the Leisure Class. This book characterized by conspicuous consumption, a propensity to avoid a useful work, and a conservatism. First, conspicuous consumption. The conspicuous consumption is the use of money or another resources to display the higher social status than another. The Veblen held that the leisure class is engaged the predatory seizure of goods without working for them. Those who accumulate wealth do so not merely to take care of their physical, spiritual, aesthetic, and intellectual wants, but rather to highlight their wealth. In order to show the power, prestige, honor, and the success in a mandatory culture. To be reputable, the consumption must be wealthful. The poor people must work in order to survive, but even their consumption pattern includes the element of wasteful, conspicuous consumption. Their outlook on life is imposed by the dominant leisure class. According to the Veblen, the woman can be especially useful in replacing the wealth important than man possess. For example, the woman wear the expensive clothes and shoes that prevent them from doing the useful labor. The woman advertise that they are supported by the wealthy man. For example, the Porsche and the Mercedes have become so common that members of the leisure class have to set up the Rolls-Royce and the Blackley.
Hi doctor, I'm right now talk about the Veblen good and upsloping curve. Veblen good is luxury good that yield not only intrinsic utility but also conspicuous consumption utility. Conspicuous consumption means that humans spending money on luxury goods to display their financial power and prestige, such as BMW, Mercedes, Hermes bag, LV, and some watch. The graph below shows that the Veblen good demand curve and is different with demand curve when the law of demand holds. Hence, it will occur positive relationship between price and quantity for the Veblen good. When the price increases, the quantity of the Veblen good will also increase. After, I will present about the Liebenstein analysis. The vertical axis is price and the horizontal axis is quantity. The upsloping demand curve is for Veblen good. The downsloping demand curve, which is D1, D2, and D3, are derived by following product to chain while assuming that conspicuous consumption utility is constant along each curve. However, conspicuous consumption utility for Veblen good is not constant as price change. In the figure, when price decreases from P3 to B2, Conspicuous consumption utility will reduce and conventional demand curve will shift to leftward, which is from D3 to D2. In conclusion, when price increase, the conspicuous consumption utility will increase too. When price decrease, conspicuous consumption utility will decrease too. In Liebenstein analysis, a decline in product price will have both effects, which is Veblen effect and standard price effect. For example, when price decrease from P2 to P1, the standard price effect is BE because the movement down along demand curve D2, which is from B to E, and the quantity demanded increase from Q2 to Q3. The Veblen effect is EA, show that the demand curve shifts leftward from D2 to D1 and quantity demanded decrease from E to A. In this case, Veblen effect of EA swam the standard price effect BE and produce a net decrease in quantity demanded of BA.
The secondly is the propensity to avoid the useful work. The member of the leisure class must avoid the useful and the productive work. They must indulge only in wasteful or useless tasks if they are to remain reputable. These occupations are governance, war, sport, and the dual observances. The person unduly given to this figure theoretical nicety may hold that these occupations are still incidentally and indirectly productive, but it is to be noted as diseases for the question at hand. They are ordinary and ostensible motive of the leisure class in engaging in this occasion is assuredly not an increase of wealth but productive effort. The government and war are carried on mandatory benefit for those engaged in this activity, but it is gain obtained by the method of seizures on conversion. These occupations are of the nature of predatory, not of productive employment. According to the Veblen, the first and fourth are present today as they are among the barbarian people. We find them in the modern warfare, in business and in sport and in game. Lastly, conservatism. The Veblen accepted that the evolution of social structure has been a process of the natural selection of institutions. The progress can be attributed to the survival of the fittest habit of thought and the enforced adaptation of the individual to a changing environment. The institution changes with the changing circumstances, and then the development institution represents the development of society. Unfortunately, there is a conflict between the current belief and the current requirement because of the cultural lag in the process of the change. A class of society that is sheltered from the environmental force will adapt it will more slowly to alter the general situation and will retard the process of the social change. The characteristic attitude from this class is indicated in the maxim that whatever is right, opposed with the law of the natural selection, as applied to the human institution that whatever is wrong. From the evolutionary standpoint, the current institutions are wrong to some extent because they do not change quickly enough to be in tune with the time.
Good day, Doctor. I will talk about the attack to neoclassical economy. First, Veblen theory constitutes attack on neoclassical economy, which think that consumers are sovereign. Consumers decided the composition of commodities, produce, and allocation of society's resources through their dollar worth. If numerous of consumption is to mainly impress neighbors who strive to retaliate by purchasing similar items, hence government need to restrict wasteful consumption to improve overall well-being. As pointed out by Britt and Ransom, Veblen in Building Economic Man into Social Man described the laissez-faire policy implication of neoclassical consumption theory. Veblen also attacked to neoclassical thought directly. For example, Veblen declared John Best Clark system static and useless, and his dynamic mainly derives static conditions. The second is Veblen also attacked Clarke's system, which is normality and natural law based on pre-evolutionary view that prevent awareness of cumulative change. And the last one is Veblen accused neoclassicists that support the present term of distribution wealth and income. Next, Veblen concerned about social economists instead of business economists such as profit, price, and ownership. This is because business economists develop to protect business community only and not relevant to the people as a whole. The third is Veblen also attacked the notion that the market are not usually modeled like perfect competition, which then dominates standard economic theory. Veblen also recognized that most businessmen had monopolistic power to control the price and use advertisement to reinforce their market position. That's all of my part. Thank you.
Wesley Clair Mitchell. He was born on 5th August in 1874 at Roseville, Illinois, USA. He was institutionalist at Columbia and leading research on the business cycle and the founder of NBER. He was also known as the brilliant student of Veblen. He was more focused on empirical studies compared to Veblen, which depends on speculations. He believed that his statistical studies would provide a familiar foundation for Veblen's minority work. The importance of empirical investigation. Economics, said Mitchell, is a science, human behavior, and the futurism he contends lies. The future economy is moving toward more research and less theorizing, and the economy is developed more fruitfully future upon quantitative side. The economists stand a chance of improving upon the work of their predecessors if they rely more and more on accurate statistical recording observation. And over the years, NBR has published a first book of statistical analysis.
I will be talking about Michel's study of business cycles. The study of business fluctuation was Michel's greatest contribution before the emergence of Great Depression and Keynes' book, which is the general theory of employment, interest, and money. Business cycle theory approached a tested explanation of experience instead of an exercise in logic, and Michel's empirical work on the business cycles led him to four major conclusions, which is the first one: business fluctuation arise in the money economy. Michel preferred to view crisis and depression not as a disease of capitalism, but rather as a problem arising in a society where economic activities are carried on mainly by making and spending money. Capitalism also has other features such as how the means of production are owned. Secondly, business cycles are widely diffused throughout the economy. Enterprises are so interdependent and allow that business firms are bound to one another by industrial, commercial, and financial ties, so none prospers or declines without affecting others. And the growth of credit has enhanced financial interdependence and allowed that the spread of corporate business organization with all its interlocking relationship organize many normally interdependent enterprises into communities of interest. Business fluctuation depends on the prospects of profit. A business enterprise can serve the community by making goods only if it makes a profit in the long run. So the subordination of services to money making is not grounded in the motives of businessmen, but is a necessary result for a money economy. And anticipated profits are more significant than past profit or losses because business looks forward more than it looks backward. And lastly, fluctuations are systematically generated by economy itself. Means that the business cycles are not minor or accidental disruption of equilibrium, but rather an inherent part of the working of its economy itself. And as each phase of cycles evolves into its successors, the economy itself gradually undergoes cumulative changes. Therefore, we must believe Michel, the economists of each generation will probably have to recast the theory of business cycles. Next, I will be talking about the social planning. Michel said that the automatic functioning of our business system is defective. So in order to overcome the first features of business fluctuation while preserving economic liberty and increasing security, social planning and national planning are needed to promote. Michel also said that reliance on national planning to ameliorate the human condition was based partly on his pragmatic psychology. He also defended social planning, denying that it is un-American. So the first and also the greatest difficulty in social planning has been to agree on what we wish to accomplish. And the second difficulty in planning derives from the interdependence of social process. Piecemeal planning, detail by detail, often brings unplanned and unwanted results. So wise social planning must consider direct and indirect effects of social action.
Thank you, Darren. Now I am going to talk about contributions of John Kenneth Galbraith in developing the ideas of institutionalist school. John Kenneth Galbraith, born in Canada, he studied at the Universities of Toronto and California. He was a chief economist, high positions during World War II, membership on the board of editors, ambassador to India during the Kennedy administration, professor of economics, chairman, novelist, and an expert on Far Eastern art. His major writing constitute both an attack on neoclassical economy thought and an analysis of modern capitalism. The critique of the neoclassical conventional wisdom is a set of ideas that is familiar to all, widely accepted, but not longer relevant. His evolution approach explores changing conditions and examines the need to change our ideas to fit new situations. Within Galbraith's overall theory of modern capitalism, one can find several specific theories that challenge orthodox economics. Two theories of particular importance. First, dependence effect. Second, theory of the behavior. Neoclassical economics assume that consumers are sovereign, means that consumers buy goods and services in the market in response to their personal desires or demand. However, according to Galbraith, it is not consumers who are sovereign in the modern industrial system, but rather the gigantic firms that produce and market goods and services. Modern capitalism is dominated by large enterprises and characterized by an abundance of contrived ones that are the product of corporate planning and Marxist advertising. Producers decide what shall be produced and then mold consumers' tastes so that they buy these products. The neoclassical theories of consumer choice take once as given. The question asked by Galbraith is that how consumers go about formulating that wants in the first place. According to Galbraith, one cannot defend production as satisfying one if that production creates the wants. Galbraith's theories of consumer demands has an important policy implication. There will be an under-allocation of resources to public goods, social imbalance, the creation of artificial wants through advertising, and the propensity for emulation shift resources toward private goods and away from public goods that have greater inherent value. Galbraith said that there is one way to remedy this imbalance, and that would be impose sales taxes on consumer goods and services using the proceeds to increase the availability of public sector goods and services. The neoclassical theory of the firm concludes that corporate behavior and performance can best be understood by assuming the firms attempt to maximize profits. According to Galbraith, this may be true in the market sector, where owners of small firms actively manage their enterprises, but it does not describe the far more important planning sector. The disgruntled stockholders who does not like the performance of a particular firm does not have the option of firing the management. The usual recourse is to sell the shares of the company and to buy shares of another company. Technostructures has an incentive to maximize the return to the millions of anonymous stockholders. The technostructures pursues much more complex purposes, which he categorized as protective and affirmative. The central protective purpose of the firm is survival, which translates into the need to earn a profit sufficient to keep most stockholders relatively happy and to provide sufficient retained earnings for investment and growth. By doing this can take the form either of direct price fixing or of informal price understandings within an industry. The purpose is to ensure that the rival firms earn a satisfactory level of profit, thus enabling them to meet their protective goals and to pursue their affirmative purpose. The major affirmative purpose of the firm is corporate goal. These are examples of corporate goal. Growth of output, sales, and revenue produces greater employment security and financial rewards to the members of the technostructures. In the orthodox theory of the firms, oligopolies restrict their production in order to boost their prices and enhance their profits. No point is better accepted by the neoclassical model than that the monopoly price is higher and the output smaller than is socially ideal. In Galbraith's theory, oligopolies fix price at low levels, ones that achieve a minimum profit and permit expansion of total output and sales. Huge advertising outlays, campaign to gain market share, unprofitable mergers between competitive and non-competitive firms, and so on. All makes perfect sense if the goal is growth. According to Galbraith, the neoclassical model describes an ill that does not exist, high oligopolistic prices and restrict outputs, because it assumes a purpose that is not pursue profit maximization. Galbraith's theory of the firm has several interesting policy implications. For example, traditional antitrust efforts should be abandoned. Their size on economics of scale, large research and development budgets. The ability to incorporate new technology. The public through government must wrest control of the planning sector of the economy from the technostructures, ensuring that it serves the public purpose. For example, a permanent public price and wage agency should control the prices of the largest firms in the economy to ensure that wage gains in the major collective bargaining agreements do not assist the growth of national productivity. This planning authority will also have to coordinate economic plans with other industrial nations. Galbraith called for government redistribution of income through public control of exclusive salaries, progressive taxation, and increase in the minimum wage, and a negative income tax plan. Firms in the market sector should be encouraged to merge so that they can compete more effectively with the firms in planning sector. Like Veblen and Mitchell before him, Galbraith saw the need for a greatly expanded role for government in the modern economy. That's all for me. Thank you.
In conclusion, the traditional institutionalism associated with Veblen, Mitchell, and Galbraith is generally critical of neoclassical economics and supportive of government intervention, and this school did not agree with the laissez-faire system, deductive and macroeconomic approach used by classical, marginalist, and neoclassical schools. And there are three reasons why government have to intervene in the economy, which is overcome clash of interests between groups, correct and overcome deficiency and make adjustment in economic life, and lastly, implement liberal democratic reform in order to bring about more equitable distribution of wealth and income. These schools were friendly towards the German historical school and its methodology. However, despite certain similarity in methodology between them, the latter was not nationalistic but more liberal and democratic in its outlook. Thank you very much.